You're listening to a Roddenberry Podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. We'll have more news this evening, but first...
The latest Gene-ology, a Roddenberry Podcast.
Episode 72, The Lesson. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Earl Green.
And I'm Ashley Thomas.
Each week on Gene-ology, we activate our Wonder Twin powers to deep dive into Gene Roddenberry's early TV writing, long before he created Star Trek.
Along the way, we look for the kinds of morals, meanings, and messages that turned up in his most famous creation, and piece together how he got to the point where he created one of our favorite fictional universes, Star Trek.
Before we get to trivia on this week's episode, let me take a brief moment, but only a brief one, to encourage you to join our Patreon or follow us on YouTube or leave a review wherever you're listening to us, if they allow you to leave reviews. I mean, we've been told recently sometimes they just allow you to, drop a star rating. Well, hey, 5 stars, always appreciated. Patreon is your gateway to all things Mission Log, including exclusive access to the unedited version of our show and our private Discord, where you can interact with us, your hosts, during scheduled live chats, along with occasional screenings. You can access all this for just $1 a month, so head over to www.patreon.com/missionlog to see what tier works for you and join the conversation.
By the way, reviews help our shows more than you know. Even if you can't come up with the words for a written review, a 5-star rating does go a long way to tell the algorithm that you like us, you love us, you want other people to learn the lesson that Gene-ology is awesome, and they might like us too. We're counting on our loyal genealogists to spread the word. And now, this week's trivia. Earl, what do you have to teach us in our lessons today?
Hopefully not any medical procedures that I am just reading about for the first time, let me put it that way. I try not to make trivia too much of an info dump in any given show, but we are back to one of those cases where this is Gene's only script for a given show, and so all the trivia for that show has only one place to go, and that's right here, so open up wide. Two Faces West was an American Western series that was produced for syndication by Screen Gems, running from October 1960 through July 1961, producing 39 half-hour episodes. As Gene was currently under contract to Screen Gems, it's easy to work out how he became involved with the show. Two Faces West starred actor Charles Bateman in dual roles, identical twin brothers Marshall Rick January and Dr. Ben January, who lived in the same frontier town, Gunnison. It was a frequent gag for the show to revolve around their easily mistaken identities and their mutual crush on local hotel owner Julie Greer, or whoever a given episode's female guest star was that week. The show is set in the 1860s, so roughly the same time as Wrangler, but after Whiplash and before Have Gun Will Travel, for those of you trying to construct a Roddenberry cinematic Western universe in your mind. The show was based on characters created by Donald Gold and Jonas Seinfeld, no relation. You might remember Charles Bateman as the first officer in the Poseidon adventure, and while the intention was to do split-screen gags as often as possible in Two Faces West, reality and the state-of-the-art of filming and editing technology of the time quickly convinced the producers to use doubles and stand-ins with their backs to the camera much, much more often than they relied on split-screen shots. Guest stars in various episodes included DeForest Kelley, John Pickard, who starred as Captain Shank Adams in Boots and Saddles, Canadian actor Donald A. Rhodes, Denver Pyle of Dukes of Hazzard fame, Victor French, L.Q. Jones, Ryan O'Neal, a very young Diane Cannon, and in one of the later episodes, Leonard Nimoy. But none of these famous names appeared in Gene's episode, which aired May 22, 1961, so it's been a little over a month since the El Paso stage episode of Have Gun Will Travel, and it's about 3 days before President Kennedy set the goal for America to put a man on the moon before the end of the 60s. Because the 2 or 3 actors listed on IMDb for the episode don't correspond to the names of the characters in the script, we have no idea if those cast listings are even the correct information or regard this episode. Lesson was the 30th episode in the run of Two Faces West, according to IMDb, though Classic TV Archive places it as episode 36. It's a very unique specimen in Gene's resume. Gene was brought in to write the teleplay of a story credited to another writer, in this case, Eustace Cockrell. Eustace had already written another episode of Two Faces West, as well as episodes of Cheyenne, Jefferson Drum, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and the Philco Television Playhouse. Eustace died in 1972, and his work on Two Faces West was among his final credits. We are often asked if there's a way for listeners to see the shows we're covering on Gene-ology, and sadly, this is one of those occasions where the answer is no. We can't even watch this show. All we have in the Roddenberry archive are a partial first draft script credited equally to both writers and dated January 5th, 1961, and then what looks like a later draft of the script without a date or credits, so there's not even a way to know if this script is substantially similar to what went out over the air. There are handwritten changes to the first draft, both barely legible and not at all legible, and there are scenes and dialogue crossed out by hand. Two Faces West, much like Wrangler, never went into reruns, so the public hasn't seen this show since the series first aired 65 years ago. The opening titles have been put on YouTube, and there's a somewhat poorly colorized episode, but not this one, uploaded to archive.org, so at least some of the show has been preserved by private film collectors, though whether the lesson is among the preserved episodes is unknown at this time. Judging by the IMDb listings, despite its longer run, Two Faces West is about as well documented as Wrangler was.
It's all right, tomboy. Doctor's here now. Come on. Hurry! What's wrong with him?
I don't know.
What do you mean, you don't know?
I'm not the doctor. I'm Rick January. You see, it was sort of a joke. I dressed as Ben so I could take Miss Sally on a picnic, and
My boy's laying here dying, and you say you ain't the doc.
I sent Ben out on a wild goose chase. But Jess is riding after him. It'll take a couple hours.
Rick, I need help. Fast. Can you help me, Tommy? Hold this under your tongue.
That is a real funny joke you pulled.
I'm sorry, Bradshaw.
Rick, hurry!
She knows medicine. I'll help as much as I can.
Yes, sir. About the funniest joke I ever heard.
In Gunnison, Colorado, the law is enforced by Marshal Rick January, and the practice of medicine is down to Dr. Ben January, identical twins with very different temperaments. The lawman is quick to draw his gun, while the doctor is more compassionate and level-headed. Each brother's exploits tend to involve the other brother very quickly. Act 1. Marshal Rick January is lounging against a post at the hotel, while Sally sits crocheting in a porch chair. Rick is putting on the charm with Sally, trying to get her to go on a date with him. However, his temper precedes him, and Sally says no, stating that the date will likely end in a brawl with some random man. Before Rick can protest further, he's interrupted by Bradshaw, a big grim-faced farmer who's ridden up on horseback with his 11-year-old boy Tom riding in front of him. Tom's not looking well, as if he's got an upset stomach. Bradshaw hollers angrily at Rick and dismounts, telling Tom to stay put. Bradshaw accuses Rick of poisoning Tom by means of sarsaparilla, peanuts, and green apples. Rick protests, saying that he didn't poison him. He was rewarding him for watering his horse for him. While Bradshaw is reading Rick the Riot Act, Tom pulls a carved willow whistle out of his pocket and begins playing it. "Oh yeah, I carved him a whistle too," says Rick. Bradshaw shouts at his son to throw the whistle away, but Tom simply pockets the whistle again. Bradshaw informs Rick that he doesn't want his son hanging out around a no-good loafer gunslinger. Sally interjects, saying that isn't fair. Rick's good with kids. Rick says he and Tommy just talk about hunting and fishing, and before he can continue further, Bradshaw informs Rick that if he catches him hanging out with Tommy again, he'll kill him. Got it? Or do I need to demonstrate right now? All right, he's your boy, says Rick, thinking better of fighting the man after his conversation with Sally. Sally looks at the boy with concern. Hadn't you better take him to see Doc Ben? She asks. Bradshaw shrugs her off. They can handle a bellyache themselves. Bradshaw mounts his horse and says, How can there be two brothers as different as you and the Doc? I'll never know. Do him and the town a favor if I'd put you out of the way. And with that, Bradshaw rides off. Rick is slightly embarrassed at Bradshaw's condemnation, asks Sally if he's really as bad as all that. Sally says that Rick's just a little wild, and some folks just can't see past that. Rick points out with a grin that he didn't fight him. That's something, right? Sally simply grins back in reply. Rick then suggests that they could go to the dance in Elkhorn tonight, but she declines. She's already got a date. A picnic with his twin brother, Dr. Ben January. Oh. Sally goes back to her crocheting. Rick then gets an idea, his eyes flicking between his brother's office and Sally. Rick moves off towards his brother's doctor's office, muttering, Well, a man can't win every race. Act 2. In Ben January's office, Ben is laying out a fresh set of clothing on a chair, preparing to change for his picnic with Sally. He's slicked his hair back and is about to change shirts when Rick enters. I'm glad I caught you, says Rick, and then spins him a yarn about how he's just been by Joe Mullen's place and he says he's ready to pay up. He's got a hog that'll go for 300 pounds, a couple dozen fat pullets, but before he can go on, Ben interrupts him. Joe Mullins? Pay me? Ben is befuddled. Rick tosses his old shirt back to Ben. Better put that old one back on. He's got 4 croaker sacks of shelled corn, the hog, the pullets, I don't know what else. Said for you to bring a wagon. Ben is tempted, but hesitant. I can't go today. Rick presses him further, reminding him that he could sell these things for as much as $60 or $80. Ben thinks about it and begrudgingly says that he could use the money to restock some medical supplies, but he had a picnic planned this afternoon with Sally. Say, Rick, could you go tell her it's off and give her my regrets? Rick agrees as Ben exits in his old clothes. Yes, sir, Brother Ben. I'll take care of everything. In fact, I doubt she'll miss you at all. Later at the hotel, Rick is dressed in Ben's fancy duds and is escorting Sally, carrying a picnic basket. You said it would be a nice day. How did you know? Sally asks. Oh, us doctors got a way of figuring things. Sally looks up at him and laughingly scolds him for impersonating his brother Rick like that. Rick's really a nice boy. Rick catches himself and says, Yeah, I guess you're right. He puts his hands on Sally's waist to help her into the buggy, but he leaves his hands there and comments, Maybe there's something to say for Rick's ways. You'd never risk a picnic alone with him, Rick comments. Sally remarks about how direct Rick is. Rick replies that Rick just takes what he wants. He understands that women like that kind of thing. Sally says they also like it when men are polite, like you, Ben. Rick hesitates and releases her waist, offering her his arm in a more polite fashion. Rick then says, Fact is, you want a man to be a little bit of both, huh? Sally hesitantly nods in response. Just have to know when to zig and when to zag, says Rick. I'll work on that. They're about to set off when an elderly stableman enters the scene. Jess hollers up at Rick, as Ben. Hey, Doc, didn't I just rent you a wagon? Rick, as Ben, tells him he's mistaken. Must have been his brother. But Jess could have swore it was him. Sally looks at Rick, as Ben, suspiciously. Jess relents. It couldn't have been him. Saw him heading out the South Road half an hour ago. Jess turns to Sally. Ought to put a bell on one of them, eh? Sally is giving Rick, as Ben, some serious side-eye. Something wrong, Sally? Rick, as Ben, asks. No, nothing at all. And off they ride into the countryside. A bit later, Jess is still sitting on the steps of the hotel. Bradshaw rides up and hollers for Jess to give him a hand. Tommy is wrapped from head to toe in a blanket. Jess helps take the boy as Bradshaw hollers for Doc January. But the doc's not here. Just left town, Jess informs him. Bradshaw's in a panic. His boy is dying. How long they been gone? Not too long, maybe an hour. He's on a picnic with Miss Sally. Bradshaw urges Jess to get him in the office and keep him warm. He's got to go get the doc before it's too late. And with that, Bradshaw rides off at a gallop towards Rick, as Ben, and Sally. Meanwhile, Rick is reclining on a picnic basket while Sally is putting out their lunch. Sally is still giving Rick some side-eye. Rick comments that lunch is looking good. Sally asks him, "Did you get that new laryngoscope yet?" "Nope," says not Ben. But Sally presses him further, asking him to explain how it works. After all, she's helped him with some patients, and she's not quite sure about that tool. Not Ben says, well, it's complicated, and stuffs a piece of chicken in his face. But Sally is persistent, telling him that the more she learns, the more helpful she can be around the office. But Rick shoots her down again, citing not wanting to mix business and pleasure. And right now, it's all pleasure. But Sally calls his bluff, saying he's talking like Rick again. Something wrong with Rick's ways, he asks. Sally begins a laundry list. Gambling, swearing, running with certain kinds of women. But Rick has a retort for each one. A bit of gambling is good for what ails you every now and then. Doctors know that. As for swearing, he's just getting his point across. As for the ladies, well, what do you want 'em to do? Beat 'em off with a stick? Sally smiles, now certain of who she's dealing with. Too bad he's not more like you, Dr. Ben. Rick is a bit miffed at this. Well, maybe I ought to be a little more like him. How so? Sally asks. Rick demonstrates by taking her hand and moving in closer for a kiss, but Sally dodges his advances and says that she'd move aside. Rick is a little too impulsive and they might both get swept away. But you're a gentleman, Dr. Ben. You can kiss me. Rick hesitates and says, Rick's a gentleman too. But Sally insists that she's heard Rick would take advantage of a girl. Rick protests. But Sally gets back on topic. Aren't you going to kiss me, Dr. Ben? You going to make me beg? Rick is incensed. Whatever faults Rick's got, he's as much a gentleman as the next man. Please? Sally asks again. But it's all too much. A giggle escapes and Rick knows he's been caught. Sally is rolling with laughter, but Rick persists. Why'd she come along if she knew it was him? Sally simply replies that she likes things about both him and Ben. Rick sweeps her into his arms and says that maybe he should make her choose. But before he can move in for the kiss, Bradshaw rides up and tells him about Tommy. Before Rick can explain who he actually is, Sally tells him that she can at least begin helping. They mount up and ride off back to town. As they arrive, Rick helps Sally down and says he better ride for Ben, but that's at least 2 hours to get there and back. Jess hollers at them to hurry up. Tommy's fading fast. Sally tells Jess he needs to ride out to the Mullins place and get Doc Ben. Jess looks from Sally to Rick, who he thinks is Ben, and is confused. You heard her. Scram, says Rick. Bradshaw will kill you for this, Rick, Jess says soberly. Then he turns and mounts Bradshaw's horse, heading to get Ben. Back in the office, Bradshaw is comforting his son and tells Rick, as Ben, to get over here and figure out what's going on. Rick simply responds that he can't and explains who he is. Bradshaw is rightfully incensed at Rick's little joke. Rick reassures him that Jess has gone to fetch the real doctor, but it will be a couple hours. Sally calls for Rick to help her, but Bradshaw steps in his path and grabs him, pulling him nose to nose. Yes, sir, about the funniest joke I ever heard. He relents and steps aside, allowing Rick to assist Sally. Sally tells him to get Ben's big medical book. Tommy's got a fever, and they've got to bring it down. Bradshaw is in the peanut gallery, spitting venom in Rick's direction. Sally tells him that she needs Rick's help now. Rick reads from the book. Body temperature can climb as high as 105, sometimes 106, with relatively few ill effects, but past that mark... Sally reads the thermometer. Tommy's nearly to 108. Bradshaw clicks a shell into place in his carbine, speaking to Rick. And when my son dies, Mr. January, you're gonna die with him. Act 3. Sally and Rick are deciding their next move. 2 lives hang in the balance. The book says to bring the fever down, they've got to cool the body down. There's still some ice in the sawdust under the saloon. They've got to go get it, crush it, and pack Tommy in it. Bradshaw's not having it. The shock will kill him, he says, but Rick insists. He'll die if we don't. But Bradshaw's had enough. Reading a book don't make you a doc any more than you wearing his clothes. Ice'll throw him into chills. Common sense'll tell you that. Bradshaw shoves the barrel of the gun into Rick's chest and pins him to the wall. Probably just want a chance to mount up and ride off. Well, mister, I'm saving you for better things. Rick puts both his hands on the barrel. I'm gonna do what I can for your son, for the boy's sake. I like Tommy, one of the nicest kids in town. You want to stop me? Pull the trigger. Sally says that he'll have to use it on her next. Tommy's got to have that ice. Bradshaw hesitates and Rick sees his opening. He twists the barrel away from him, pulling the gun to one side. Bradshaw fires, putting a hole in the wall. Rick wrenches the gun away from him. You want a second shot? Now, I did a blame fool thing tricking Ben out of town, but you can't change that now. You can either help us and maybe save your boy, or you can be a halter on us. Now make your move, one way or the other. A tense moment passes, but Bradshaw relents. All right, I'll help. And with that, Rick goes to fetch the ice, and Bradshaw pulls the sheets off the bed. They'll pack the ice in that. Rick returns, and he and Bradshaw crack the ice with firewood, while Sally packs it around Tommy, while monitoring his thermometer. His temperature is blessedly coming down. But Tommy's got signs of diphtheria. Bradshaw says that tracks. The Saunderson kid had it. Tommy played with him before he died. How long before Ben gets back? Another hour at least. Tommy's breathing is more rapid. Rick is checking the book for ideas. Sally tries to break the silence. Rick, you made Tommy a willow whistle, didn't you? Bradshaw says he's whooped Tommy good for that one. Why? Sally asks. I don't like him hanging around Rick January's type, that's why. Few more whoopings and you'd be more like your brother and less like a no-account gunslinger. If he grows up to be half the man Rick is, you'll have quite a son, Mr. Bradshaw, Sally responds. Before Bradshaw can retort, Tommy starts choking. Rick hurriedly reads through the book. Here's something about a membrane that thickens, moves down. Sally takes the book from him. It becomes necessary to do a laryngectomy. Sally then explains what that is. You have to cut a slit in the windpipe and let the patient breathe out of that. Then you... But Bradshaw objects. You ain't cutting my boy's throat. There's not time to argue. Sally reads the instructions step by step, telling Rick to get the scalpel. Bradshaw continues to express his concerns about slitting an artery. Rick says he's been skinning rabbits since before he could walk. He knows what an artery looks like. My boy ain't no rabbit. But Tommy's stopped breathing. Rick is searching through the bag, but Bradshaw's had enough. He moves to grab Rick, but Rick is prepared, punching Bradshaw in the stomach. As he doubles over to the ground, Rick gives him a knee to the chin, knocking him out. They continue with the procedure, but they need something to hold the incision open, allowing air to pass through. But they can't find the appropriate silver tube in the medical bag. The whistle. Sally finds the whistle in the boy's pocket, sanitizes it, and carefully lays it on the boy's chest. Rick nervously starts to make the incision, Sally directing him. Just then, a wagon moving at breakneck speed careens into town, a crate of pullets falling off and shattering in the hullabaloo. Chickens scatter into the street as another crate with the hog falls off. The hog emerges from the wreckage unscathed. Back in the office, Rick and Sally are afraid they're too late. They start to take the wet sheets off, about to wrap him up in some dry blankets. Bradshaw starts to stir, painfully remembering where he is. And then there it is. A faint whistling sound. Tommy's breathing again. Tom? Tommy boy? Tommy's eyes flutter, and he offers his father a trace of a smile. Bradshaw apologizes to Rick. Guess I made a fool of myself. No more than I did, says Rick. As Ben enters the office, he asks one of the bystanders what's happened. Well, You might say that Rick slit young Tommy Bradshaw's throat. Later, Ben and Sally are on their postponed picnic, munching on some chicken. Rick sure taught me a lesson, Ben says. Sally is puzzled. I took the wagon out to Joe Mullen's place. Told him I'd come to collect. He looked at me sort of strange, but then started loading up the wagon. Gonna try that on my other past due accounts. Them that asks receives, says Sally. Rick's got other good ideas, Ben says, and moves in to kiss Sally as Rick did before, but just as before, Sally moves her head aside. Sally eyes him and asks, Doc, could you describe a laryngoscope? Ben does, and Sally says, Oh, good, it's you. Say, where is Rick anyway? Back in town, Rick is standing over the broken crates, a couple of struggling chickens under his arms, and calling, Sue-wee! The end.
Well done on the recap, Ashley. There's a lot going on in this story, and there's some serious drama happening here.
Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't oh my gosh, this kid might die because you pulled a stupid-ass prank. Jeez. Pardon my French.
The first time I went through the script, normally I will go through it and then come back to it and pick out the little scene that we're going to do. But this one, first time I read it, I was like, oh, this is the scene. Mm-hmm. There was no question.
None.
Where, what the scene was. And in fact, it was really a matter of, wait, do I do this all the way to the act break? No, that's going to be like a 5-minute scene. Where do I cut it? Yeah, I'm not sure how the Writers Guild arbitrated credits in 1961, but I thought it was fascinating that the first draft script credited Eustace Cockrell and Gene equally. Mm-hmm. But then apparently you got to the show and Gene had teleplay credit and Eustace only had story credit. Like at some point, maybe because he was booked to do something else. Yeah, as you do, because this is the thing that's happened to Gene, too, back when we were covering the psychiatrist episode of Harbor Command. Gene had to move on to another thing that was going to pay him, and so he wound up with only story credit and not teleplay credit. It's a thing that happens. I'm not really sure what happened here. It would be fascinating to find some place that has the production paperwork and find out.
Right.
But that first draft opens with a scene that involves Bradshaw right from the top of the show, and very quickly makes it clear that he and Rick already had bad blood.
I don't think they were even mad love at some point. So, anyway, sorry, that was a Taylor Swift joke.
Well, I mean, he was mad because it almost made it sound like Rick was responsible for Tommy being sick in the first place, which... That's a choice. I'm glad it's a choice they lost because, boy, that would not make Rick look good.
No, it would not. You got him sick on sarsaparilla, peanuts, and green apples. I mean, as far as snacks go, it could be worse.
I mean, thank goodness Rick didn't buy some prune shine from some guy driving through town at random.
I know, right? Goodness gracious.
Yeah, speaking of things that make you go, whoa, Rick extolling the virtues of a man who takes what he wants because he understands women like that. Okay.
Earl, I got real mad reading this script because I'm like, first of all, you're gonna pretend to be her, pretend to be your brother who she actually wants to go on a date with. So I'm like, this is already you're inserting yourself where you do not belong, sir. And two, Sally's obviously smart. I'm really glad they didn't make Sally an idiot in this.
Sally's my favorite thing about this script, and we will get into that later. But I loved that she got to push back on that. Mm-hmm. I have no idea if Sally was a recurring, semi-regular, whatever on this show. I think she was just for this script. This feels like one of those characters that people are thinking of when they say Gene wrote women well, because he really did this time.
Right. So I was really happy that she was, caught on pretty quick. I don't think this is Ben, so I'm gonna pull one over on him. And the fact that she knew she could at least trust him enough to where, if she pushed back, he was gonna not be awful.
Yeah.
So, but at this point, I was like, if this goes real south, I'm going to, and played for laughs, I'm going to like go toss the script in the air, even though it's a PDF on my computer. So.
Yeah, holy Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it turns out better than it starts.
Yes.
So I was grateful for that, but I got really skeeved out. I was like, yeah, no wonder. I don't want my kid hanging out with Rick either. He's a scumbag. Ugh.
Yeah. Now, like you said, fortunately, it does improve considerably because the buildup of tension in those scenes that get us from revealing that Rick is not Ben to Bradshaw, all the way to the end of that first act, that first commercial break. That is amazing writing there, because this is a deadly serious misunderstanding, about on a par with A Time for Hanging.
Right.
And it feels like it's got that amount of tension. And I feel like maybe Bradshaw is, I don't know if he's overreacting or if he is misdirecting his fire, but it is still possible to understand why he is that angry.
You know, at least in this scene, he is very rightfully angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, his kid's on a stretcher and might keel over because, you scammed your brother out of a date and my kid might die because you did that. Yeah, I'd be shooting bullets too.
Not a good look, Rick. One thing that I wish had been pointed up a little bit better in the script, more of a point had been made of this. Rick is normally packing heat, but because he is disguised as his brother, he is not.
Right.
And so he is at a total disadvantage here. Now, he does get the gun away from Bradshaw later, but for a little bit there, it looks like his goose is cooked.
Yeah, I'm like, man, this is going to get ugly real quick. I mean, if this guy wasn't the main character, like, I'd be more afraid, but it still looks like things are going to go real bad for everybody here.
And everybody means that all the townsfolk are just gawking through the window of Ben's office at this guy holding a gun on Rick, and nobody's saying anything. Anybody?
Yeah,
Bueller?
yeah.
Well, did someone bring popcorn? I mean, what is this?
I mean, Rick's the marshal, so I'm assuming they're not trying to intervene because he's the marshal, but still.
That's wild. I mean, I've heard of making sure that your non-speaking day players do not utter a sound, otherwise you have to pay them more, but this was a little out there.
I know, right?
Although one of them does talk, and it's really alarming because when Ben finally rides back into town, some rando briefs him on the situation, who really needs to pick his words more carefully. Yeah, this is exactly what the script says. Your brother just cut the throat of young Tom Bradshaw. That sounds really bad.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Can we elaborate, please? But, of course, Ben just rushes in there. But still, it's like, that does not sound like something my brother would do. But then also, presumably, at the beginning of this day, trying to steal your lady did not sound like something that he thought his brother would do, and yet here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I have no twins, but I have to wonder, those of you who have twins out there, please elaborate if twin shenanigans as seen on TV are real. Do you swap places that often?
You talk about a tension release. That last scene where Rick is out there trying to catch all these critters that spilled off of Ben's wagon as he hauled butt back into town. I got a big laugh out of that because
that was great.
Pig suey.
Yeah.
As someone who lives just across town from the home of the Arkansas Razorbacks, I thought Rick was about to call the hogs there for a second. I was like, oh wait, this script is going to be our state bird or something. With the pages flapping.
Sweet. I felt like I really got to channel my inner Appalachian upbringing reading the recap on this. Is like the Southern dialect is written into the script, so I'm like, all right,
I got this.
got to channel my home talk. I haven't done any hog calling, but I grew up around it, so.
Well, just get on YouTube, look up some combination of like Arkansas Razorback's hog call.
Okay.
It's
All
a
right.
thing.
It's a
loud.
Okay.
It's the only way to drown it out is take part in it. It's like group madness. I can't even explain it.
I mean, there was a few years ago where UT Knoxville fans registered on the Richter scale because Neyland Stadium was that loud.
Yeah.
So I understand the group madness. I mean, the joke in East Tennessee was the three largest religions were Baptist, Methodist, and football, and some people practiced more than one. But that was a welcome bit of relief at the end, chasing the hogs and got chicken under each arm.
Okay, I think we both said it in the previous segment, but I've got to get this out of my system. I am not a fan of romantic romps or sex farces, especially the latter that hinge entirely on mistaken identity.
Yeah.
At their most innocent, it seems like they are requiring someone to carry all the idiot balls at once and not notice things they should have noticed. And if they're less than innocent, then like the movie I mentioned previously, it gets really gross.
Yeah.
I'm glad our episode of Two Faces West is on the much more harmless end of the spectrum. And, for all I know, some scenario not unlike this makes up about 1/5 of the episodes.
Yeah, it's, I'm glad it turned out as it did. I still didn't like that it happened to start with. Like, that doesn't make me inclined to root for Rick as a main character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's much better things to talk about in this script, though, but I just wanted to get that out of my system.
Yeah.
Because that steams my beans. That seems like a turn of phrase that would be right at home in Two Faces West.
Well, okay. And can I just say, along those lines, we've already...
Steamed beans?
Steamed beans, no. But we already touched on it in OBS, but... I don't like that we also have to make Sally lean into the stereotype, like, oh, but you kind of want a man that's a little bit of both. I'm like, please do not see this as prescriptive or descriptive of all women. Like, no.
Yeah, well, especially since a lot of these Westerns were, especially the less heavy ones, tended to be family hour viewing, so the kids are soaking this all up.
Yeah.
The boys and the girls.
Yeah.
And I have thoughts on that, and I have expressed them in editions of this podcast past. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
If this is family hour viewing, let's not be gross with it. But sadly, it was the time.
Yeah. No, and I know that, and I find it frustrating that it's in a Gene script. But, I mean, and to be fair, this is maybe a half Gene script. So.
Yeah, and also, we can't, it doesn't really excuse it, but Gene, much like the script, is the product of his times.
Sure, yeah.
He was indoctrinated into the masculinity script as much as anyone, and I'm just glad that he started writing stories where he pushes back on it.
Right.
And the biggest victory of this script for me is that Sally pushes back on it.
Yes. I did like that she picked up very quickly, like, I may not be going on a date with Ben today.
Yeah, I really want to, my whole discussion, the whole point of discussion for me is I love Sally. She's the best thing here.
Absolutely.
She starts out as the obligatory romantic interest of the week, but she is so much savvier than that. I want the show to be about her and not the brothers. I'm not hooked on the brothers.
Right.
Because you think about it, she is bringing the life-saving expertise and knowledge here.
Mm-hmm.
And she is wise to the ways of both of the brothers and everyone around her. She's the brains behind the very literal operation that has to be performed to save Tommy's life.
Right.
And she gets to out loud push back on the sexist BS that Gene puts into the mouths of the guys around her.
Yeah. Yeah, so not just in this scene where she's pushing back on Rick and like, making fun of him for thinking he could trick her. But then also like telling Bradshaw's like, if you kill him, you're going to have to kill me too, because, we've got to do this to save your son's life. And
that line really stuck out to me too. I mean, I've got a note about that one.
Yeah.
She's being a badass here dealing with Bradshaw.
She truly, truly is. We don't know the actress who played Sally, correct?
No, we don't.
Okay.
I really wish I knew, because I wish I could see it in my mind.
In my brain, she looks like Susan Oliver. So she's not very tall, and she's, sweet and pretty and diminutive, and she's up in Bradshaw's face, who I'm imagining is like a big hulking brute, and saying, you need to sit down.
Yeah. A justifiably mad kitten this time. That would be great to see her in.
Absolutely.
Because we've seen so many promising women characters get tripped up by outmoded thinking and outmoded customs.
Mm-hmm.
And, apologies to Eve Browning and Maggie O'Banion and all their sisters. I feel like Sally is as close as we have come to seeing Gene start to get this right. Although the thought occurred to me, we had the ladies in Sarong not too long ago.
Yeah.
Who, those sisters were doing it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're finally seeing some forward motion here on how Gene is writing women. And it's about damn time.
Oh my gosh. I'm very thankful.
Because it's not just enough to make the woman in your story sassy. I mean, we coasted through the sassy barrier way back in Highway Patrol.
Right.
But Sally's driving the story here.
She really is. And without her, like, Tommy would be dead.
Without her, Tommy would be dead? Rick January would be dead.
Yeah. So
she's being proactive. She's telling the guys what to do, because the gaps in their knowledge are blazingly apparent.
Right.
Was Rick going to perform that operation without her guidance? I'm going to suggest that even if he had, with the best of intentions, the outcome wouldn't have been positive.
No.
For the kid or for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so early in the script, I was a little iffy on, Dr. Ben, teach me so I can assist you better, because you are looking so medically makey-outy tonight.
It is a medical condition of how makey-outy you are looking tonight, Dr. Ben.
Yes.
You are clinically makey-outy tonight, Dr. Ben.
Let me feel your forehead. Oh, no,
Oh.
I can't. I don't even need to do that. You're hot.
Too hot.
But even there, and this is why I love your idea of Susan Oliver, because I could see her playing this scene. She's already sus that she's dealing with one brother instead of the other, and she's springing the trap on him because she's completely outmaneuvered him.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's smarter than just about every man in this story, and there is no barrier to that.
Right.
She saves the day. She's got this. There are morals, meanings, and messages that I'll get to in the wrap, but for my discussion here, this is all I've got. It's just, I love Sally. Why is the show not about Sally?
Right.
I want more Sally.
Why isn't it called Sally Goes West or Sally Faces West?
Yeah, Sally, medicine woman. Oh, that's got a nice ring to.
Ooh, Dr. Sally, medicine woman.
Yeah.
I like it.
Ashley, we're almost done with this too soon, because I really liked this one.
Yeah, I was skeeved out at first, but it got better. So I'd be curious just to see a little more of the show. I feel like, because the one episode that is available to watch on archive.org, there are no women in it. So I don't know if this is a good example of how women were typically written in this series, even if Gene Roddenberry wasn't writing them.
This may have been the high watermark for all we know.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you, I put this in the same hopper that I put Hotel de Paris in. It's like, okay, I would like to see more of this to see if it's always this good.
Right.
And we said that about Hotel de Paris, and that episode wasn't even that good.
Yeah.
We just wanted to see more because we like the idea of the setup.
Yeah, and he's got a cute dog, and any guy that parks his horse in the lobby of a hotel, come on, that's funny.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if it's good enough for Sam.
That's right.
With his bowl of sugar. But just sort of critiquing the writing here, Gene's economy of writing is becoming a hallmark. The vast majority of this episode happens in Ben's medical office.
Right.
Which I have to imagine was a standing set that they didn't have to build fresh for this episode. So somewhere in the world, he got a happy line producer.
Right.
There are some hints of things that Gene has written in the past. I think we've pointed out before that Gene's work seems loaded down with very flawed father figures. Roy Crutter's dad, Billy John's dad from Wrangler, Sam Tuttle. And here we've got a new one. I feel like Bradshaw is closest to Mr. Carter. He means well, but his anger is blinding him to what he should actually be doing to solve the problem. So, yes, there's a bit of the Sam Tuttle prideful fool there. But it's Mr. Carter he reminds me of the most. He cares about his kid, but his frustration at his own powerlessness in the situation is making him want to lash out at someone else. And as Rick explains to him while he was clobbering Bradshaw into submission and being less of a problem, that ain't helping. It's not going to help Tommy, just like Carter's dad wanting to lynch the guy who actually did the crime. Paladin had to tell him, hey, if we could get a signed confession out of this guy instead of lynching him in the dead of night in the middle of nowhere, maybe we could get your son pardoned.
Right.
It's amazing that you have to talk that kind of sense into someone. But, again, the flawed father character is getting increasingly hard to ignore in Gene's work. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze him through his work, but it's shining like a neon light that this is an archetype in Gene's storytelling.
I mean, if someone wants to go out there and do some genealogy stats for what we've covered so far, I would be curious to know out of how many episodes that we've covered feature a dad who's not doing the right thing by his kid.
Yeah, it's enough of an statistically prominent feature in Gene's storytelling that I can't just chalk it up to coincidence now. I feel like there's also kind of some of the pressure cooker countdown from A Time for Hanging here. They send Jess off to find Ben January, and it will take him a couple of hours to return. Reminded me a lot of the writer they sent out to ask Pitcairn's would-be employer if Pitcairn was actually his would-be employee.
Right.
Now, it is interesting to note we are rapidly approaching the end of Gene Roddenberry, Western writer. After this episode of Two Faces West, there's a lot more modern-day drama on his docket. We have a handful of Have Gun Will Travel episodes yet to come in that show's final season. We have a story credit for an episode of The Virginian. And then after that, Gene is firmly lodged in the 20th century, and of course, we know he's not even going to stick with the 20th century for very long.
No.
So perhaps the various elements of this story that kind of feel like Gene's hit shuffle play on his own greatest hits, and maybe what it's telling us is this is the sound of a man wearily grinding out a paycheck gig in a genre that he feels like he has said it all, and so now he is just going to stand back and say the same thing louder for those in the back.
Once more with feeling.
Yeah. It feels like he still has stuff to say. Seeking revenge is often a foolish and futile course of action. Gene has said that before, but because humans are going to human, unfortunately, it's an evergreen. But the message that seems really unique to this script that I picked out is also kind of locked into the setup of Two Faces West. Damn it, Bradshaw, I'm a gunfighter, not a doctor. Don't misrepresent yourself. I know that some of that can be blamed on our culture, a culture where the first question we're often asked in any social setting is, what do you do? In a way that rhymes with, what is your net worth, or at least your networking value to me? But trying to big yourself up for the benefit of others, don't do it. It is always going to backfire, especially in the age of the internet where people can check this stuff. If the people around you are only concerned with what do you do and with social standing, find better people to be around rather than trying to bluff your way into that circle. Now, Rick January learned all this the hard way, but he almost learned it the fatal way. The really delightful takeaway for me here, frankly, is Sally. Capable, headstrong, not taking anyone's Sally. I would really like to be able to see this episode and see more of this series to see if it holds up as well as this one did on paper. Ashley, what did you find here? Because I found a lot to talk about.
Yeah. I think everything that I would say would just be yes and amen to you, my friend. I really love Sally. I think Sally is absolutely the best thing about this episode. And, I really hope someday we can verify that, yes, Susan Oliver did in fact play Sally in this one episode of Two Faces West. Again, y'all, just to be abundantly clear, we don't know who played Sally. This is just my headcanon. This is what's happening inside my theater of the mind as I read the script. She isn't afraid to pull one over on Rick. She takes charge of the situation when she sees that, oh snap, this kid's gonna die if we don't intervene in some way. And she stands up to Bradshaw, who I imagine, is a big hulking brute of a farmer and is, absolutely dwarfs her. So I just think that she is so much the voice of reason and strength of this episode that I don't really care that much about Rick and Ben. Yeah. I mean, sure, they might be, the exciting male leads of this cowboy western. One's a marshal, one's a doctor, what is it? Was it Patty Duke that had the identical cousins or whatever? I mean, these guys might be fine, but can we get more characters like Sally? Can we
Yes.
Can we have more women who are not fawning all over these guys? Women who have agency, women who act and take charge. Can we get a little more of this, please and thank you?
Yes, please. And I suppose we will find that out in our next installment.
Mm-hmm.
Special thanks to the Roddenberry Repertory Players. Our cast this week featured Scott Marcus as Rick January, Marianne Butler as Sally, and Kevin Ibbotson as Bradshaw. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at MissionLogPod. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment.
On the next Gene-ology, A Man's World. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi.
We'll be back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.